I had driven this stretch of highway a dozen times before. It's not like the New Mexico desert was new to me. It was the shortcut from Austin to Phoenix, where I was meeting some old college friends for a long overdue reunion. Late nights and long drives never bothered me before. I'd always liked the solitude of the road, the hum of the engine, the stars above. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the storm rolling in, the kind you can smell long before you see it. Maybe it was the way my headlights seemed swallowed by the darkness in front of me, illuminating only a small slice of the vast, empty landscape. I glanced at the clock on my dashboard. 2:13 a.m. The road stretched out before me in a straight line, disappearing into the horizon. There wasn't another car in sight. Just me, alone with the desert and the feeling of being watched. I shook off the thought. My mind was just playing tricks on me after too many hours on the road. I told myself I'd pull over for a break at the next gas station, even if just for a quick cup of bad coffee and a stretch. The map said there was a rest stop up ahead in about 15 miles. The problem was, I hadn't seen a sign for it in a while. Another 20 minutes passed, and there was still no sign of that rest stop. Nothing but the endless black road and the occasional scrub brush blowing across the highway. That feeling, the one I couldn't shake, started creeping back. The sensation of something lurking just outside the range of my headlights, watching, waiting. Then, out of nowhere, a road sign appeared on the side of the road, its reflective letters barely visible in my dim beams. Route 6. Next exit, 1 mile. Route 6. I hadn't seen that on the map. In fact, I didn't remember ever hearing of Route 6 before, but maybe I was just tired. That rest stop should have come up by now. My hands tightened on the wheel as I considered it. 1 mile. What could it hurt? I veered onto the exit ramp and followed the curve until it met a smaller 2-lane road. The pavement was cracked and uneven, the desert stretching out even further on either side. And then I saw it. A small, flickering neon sign in the distance. Roadside Cafe. Finally, a place to stop. Relief washed over me. I pulled into the lot, which was mostly dirt and gravel. The cafe looked ancient, like something straight out of a black and white movie from the 1950s, with peeling paint and a crooked metal roof. An old gas pump, the kind you'd see in a museum, stood rusted beside the building. There were no other cars around. The silence was unnerving. I stepped out of my car, feeling the dry wind whip across my face. As I walked toward the door, the bell above it jingled, cutting through the quiet as I pushed it open. Inside, the place was almost empty. Just a couple of dusty booths, a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in decades, and a counter lined with faded stools. A lone figure stood behind the counter, her back to me, washing dishes by hand in the sink. I cleared my throat. "Hi, can I just get a coffee?" The woman turned slowly. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were dark, almost sunken. Her lips curled into a strange smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, hun. Coffee black?" "Yeah, that's fine," I replied, taking a seat at the counter, feeling a knot tightening in my stomach. Something was off. Maybe it was just the exhaustion catching up with me. She poured the coffee and slid the mug across the counter without another word. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth. But something in the air felt wrong. The smell. The coffee didn't smell like coffee. It smelled metallic. I pushed the cup away slightly, deciding I'd drink it later. I needed a restroom and maybe a splash of cold water on my face. "Bathroom's around the corner, hun," the woman said, her voice just a little too cheerful now, as though she knew my thoughts before I spoke them. I thanked her and headed down the narrow hallway. The place was even creepier back there, with dim lighting and a musty smell. I found the bathroom, flicked the switch, and was greeted by a single flickering fluorescent light. I stepped inside, locking the door behind me, and splashed some water on my face. As I stared at my reflection, I noticed something odd in the mirror, a window behind me. But when I turned around, there was no window, just the same cracked tiles and grimy walls. I turned back to the mirror. The window was there again, and this time I saw movement, a shadow, passing by outside. I froze. There shouldn't have been anything there. I was in the middle of the desert, alone. Then, the knock. It was slow at first, almost polite. A light tap-tap on the door, like someone gently reminding me of their presence. I didn't move. My mind raced. Was it the woman from the counter? I didn't answer, but the knocking grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding, until I felt the cold porcelain of the sink behind me. Then, the knocking stopped. Silence. I stayed there, holding my breath, waiting for whatever came next. And then, from outside the door, I heard a voice. A man's voice, low and raspy. "Turn around." The voice sent a jolt of terror through me. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. "Turn around," the voice said again, more urgent this time. I whipped around, expecting to see someone, something, but there was no one, just the empty bathroom. My eyes darted to the mirror again. The window was still there. The shadow was closer now, just outside the glass, almost pressing against it. I stumbled backward, out of the bathroom, into the hallway. I didn't stop until I was back at the counter, my chest heaving, trying to catch my breath. The woman behind the counter was still standing there, smiling that same eerie smile. "Everything all right, hun?" I stared at her. She wasn't real. None of this was. It couldn't be. I have to go," I muttered, grabbing my keys from the counter and rushing out the door. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, and I hurried to my car. The headlights flickered on as I fumbled with the ignition. As I sped out of the parking lot, I glanced in my rearview mirror, expecting to see that same neon sign receding into the distance. But there was nothing. The cafe was gone, just an empty stretch of desert behind me. I kept driving, my knuckles white on the wheel. Route 6 stretched endlessly ahead of me, the highway swallowing me whole. I checked my GPS, but it was dead. No signal. I don't know how long I drove before I saw the next sign. Route 6, next exit 1 mile. It was the same exit. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest. I had just left that place. But there it was again. The same cracked road, the same flickering neon sign. The cafe stood there, waiting. The engine died, and the night closed in around me. I was trapped, in a loop I couldn't escape. The road had brought me back, and it wasn't letting me go. Maya stared at the dimly lit gas station ahead, the only beacon of light on this seemingly endless stretch of highway. She glanced at the dashboard. Nearly midnight. The fuel gauge hovered just above empty. Beside her, Jake was already asleep, head tilted back against the headrest, snoring softly. The two of them had been driving since early morning, heading from Ohio to Colorado, eager for a week of hiking and adventure in the Rockies. The trip had been going smoothly until the interstate exit signs had started becoming less frequent. And then, nothing. It was as if they'd driven right off the map, into a void where even the GPS refused to load. "Jake," Maya whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. "I'm going to pull in here for gas. You awake?" He grunted, but didn't open his eyes. "Of course you're not," she muttered, pulling into the station. It was one of those rundown places you'd expect to see in a low-budget horror film, the kind where the walls were cracked and covered in grime, and the windows were smeared with dirt. A flickering neon sign hung above the entrance, and not a single other car was in sight. She shivered as she stepped out of the car. The air was colder than it should have been for late August, and there was an eerie stillness to the place. She filled the tank quickly, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with every passing second. A quick glance over her shoulder revealed nothing but the empty highway stretching into darkness. Maya rushed inside the station to pay, her footsteps echoing through the near-empty store. A bored-looking cashier sat behind the counter, his eyes glued to a small TV set playing an old Western movie. He didn't even acknowledge her as she approached. "Pump 4, she said, placing a few crumpled bills on the counter. The man slowly turned his head toward her. His eyes were hollow, like he hadn't slept in days. "You shouldn't be out on this road," he said, his voice low and gravelly. Maya blinked. "Excuse me?" The cashier leaned forward slightly. "This road, after midnight. Bad things happen." She laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unease that had been creeping up her spine. "Well, we've got a few more hours of driving to go, so I guess we'll take our chances." He didn't respond, just stared at her for a moment longer before slowly turning back to his TV. Maya hurried back to the car, heart racing now. As she slid into the driver's seat, Jake stirred, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "Everything okay?" he mumbled. "Yeah, just let's get out of here," she said, starting the engine and pulling out onto the road. The next 30 miles were uneventful, but the farther they drove, the stranger things became. The road, which had been well maintained just a few hours ago, now seemed cracked and worn, like it hadn't been driven on in years. There were no signs, no markers, just a seemingly endless stretch of asphalt cutting through the forest. Maya felt her nerves prickling. "Jake," she said softly, glancing at him. "Does something feel off to you?" Jake, now fully awake, frowned as he looked out the window. "Yeah, it's weird. I don't remember the road looking this bad before." They drove in silence for another mile, the forest around them growing denser, the trees taller and more twisted. The moon, which had been bright and full when they started the trip, was now obscured by a thick fog rolling in from the woods. Suddenly, the car's headlights flickered, then went out entirely. Maya's heart skipped a beat. "What the—" "Pull over," Jake said, his voice tense. She did, easing the car to the side of the road. The headlights came back on, but now the engine sputtered and died. "What the hell is going on?" Maya muttered, trying the ignition again. Nothing. Jake leaned forward, peering through the windshield. "Did you see that?" "See what?" "Out there, in the fog." Maya squinted, but all she could see was the thick mist swirling around them. "There's nothing there, Jake." He shook his head, his hand tightening around the door handle. "No, there was something. I saw it." Before she could respond, the radio suddenly crackled to life, filling the car with static. Then, a voice, faint but clear, whispered through the speakers. "Turn around." Maya froze. "Did you—" Jake nodded, his face pale. "Yeah, I heard it." "Okay, that's it," Maya said, her voice trembling. "I'm calling for help." She reached for her phone, but there was no signal. "Great, no reception." Jake turned to her, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here." "How? The car won't start." Before Jake could answer, the fog outside thickened, swirling faster now, almost as if it was alive. And then, out of the mist, a figure emerged, tall and shadowy, its form shifting and warping as it moved closer to the car. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, backing away from the window. "What is that?" Jake's hand shot out, locking the doors, but the figure kept coming, its face hidden beneath a hood. As it reached the car, it stopped, standing motionless for a moment, before slowly raising one hand and tapping on the window. Tap, tap, tap. Neither of them moved. They barely breathed. The figure stood there, tapping again, this time louder. "Turn around," the voice on the radio repeated, more insistent now. Without thinking, Maya turned the key again. The engine roared to life, as if the car itself was afraid. "Go!" Jake shouted. Maya slammed her foot on the gas, the tires screeching as they sped away, the figure disappearing into the fog behind them. For the next few miles, neither of them spoke, their eyes darting back and forth between the road and the fog that seemed to follow them. Finally, they saw it. A turnoff, an exit leading to a small town in the distance. Without hesitation, Maya swerved onto the ramp, desperate to get off the highway. As they drove into the town, the fog began to lift, and the tension in the car slowly eased. "Do you think it's over?" Maya asked, her voice shaky. Jake didn't answer right away. He was staring at something ahead. Maya followed his gaze. Her blood ran cold. In the distance, at the far end of the town, stood the same gas station they had left hours ago. The same flickering neon sign, the same cracked windows. They hadn't gone anywhere. The road had brought them back. Jake swallowed hard. What do we do now? Before Maya could answer, the radio crackled once more, and the voice whispered again, this time with a chilling finality. "You should have turned around." The desert stretched out for miles, an ocean of sand and rock under a sky fading from purple to black. The highway shimmered in the heat, though the sun had long since dipped beneath the horizon. I checked the clock on the dashboard, 9:45 p.m. I still had hours to go before I hit Los Angeles. It had been 3 days since I'd left Houston, and my body was beginning to ache from the long drive. Normally, I loved road trips, the thrill of being alone with nothing but the road ahead and music to keep me company. But tonight was different. Tonight, the highway felt suffocating, like the desert itself was closing in on me. I hadn't seen another car for miles, not since I left the last gas station 2 hours ago. My phone had lost service shortly after, and the radio was nothing but static. I tried scanning for stations, but there was only silence. Not even the hum of a distant country tune. Just nothing. The gas needle was just above half, so I wasn't worried about running out, but a sense of unease had settled deep in my gut. I tried to shake it off, turning up the volume on my Bluetooth speaker. The soft strumming of a guitar filled the car, a local band I'd discovered a few months back. Their song was slow, haunting, but familiar, comforting even. Then, I saw her. A figure in the distance, standing by the side of the road. A woman, or maybe a girl. It was hard to tell from this far away. She was barely illuminated by my headlights, just a small, hunched silhouette against the vast emptiness. I slowed down instinctively, my pulse quickening. Hitchhikers were rare out here, and at this hour, even rarer. I didn't plan to stop, I never did. But as I got closer, something made me reconsider. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s, with long dark hair falling past her shoulders, wearing jeans and a faded sweatshirt. She had a backpack slung over one shoulder and was staring at the ground, not even looking up as my car approached. I passed her by, gripping the wheel tightly. My mind screamed to keep driving. I knew all the stories. Hitchhikers were never safe. But a mile down the road, the guilt settled in, twisting in my gut. What if she was in trouble? What if she'd been out there for hours? I told myself I'd just check on her, make sure she wasn't stranded. With a deep sigh, I turned the car around. By the time I made it back, she was still there, standing in the exact same spot. She hadn't moved. I pulled up alongside her and rolled down the passenger window. "Hey, you need a ride?" For a moment, she didn't respond. Her head was still down, her hair hiding her face. Then, slowly, she turned and looked at me. Her eyes were wide, almost too wide, like she hadn't slept in days. But they were empty, hollow. She stared at me for a long time before finally speaking. "Thanks," she said, her voice low and flat. She climbed into the passenger seat without another word, setting her backpack on the floor between her feet. The door shut with a soft click, and the silence in the car felt oppressive. I swallowed, glancing at her from the corner of my eye. "Where are you headed?" She stared straight ahead, not answering right away. Her hands rested on her knees, her fingers twitching slightly. "West," she finally said. I nodded, trying to keep the mood light. "Well, you're in luck. I'm headed to LA." She didn't smile, didn't even blink, just sat there, her eyes fixed on the road in front of us. The guitar on my Bluetooth speaker still played softly in the background, filling the silence. I tapped the wheel nervously, trying to think of something else to say. But every word I thought of stuck in my throat. After a few more minutes of uncomfortable silence, she spoke again. "Do you like music?" The question caught me off guard. Yeah, I do." She nodded slowly, her fingers still twitching. "I used to love music." Her voice had changed, softer now, almost sad. I stole a quick glance at her, and for the first time, she turned to look at me. "They sang to me," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. I frowned. "Who did?" "The voices." I felt a chill creep up my spine. Something about the way she said it, so matter-of-factly, made the air in the car seem heavier. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to ignore the sudden unease tightening in my chest. "You ever hear the voices too?" she asked, her head tilting slightly, eyes unblinking. I shook my head, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "No, I don't think so." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the guitar was the only thing breaking the silence, but even that seemed far away now, like it was being drowned out by something else, something just on the edge of hearing. And then I heard it, a faint hum, like someone was singing far off in the distance. It was barely audible, a low melody that seemed to weave in and out of the static of the night. I glanced at the Bluetooth speaker. The song playing hadn't changed, but now there was something underneath it, a layer of sound that hadn't been there before. The hum grew louder, more distinct, and I realized it wasn't coming from the speaker at all. It was coming from her. She was humming. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but there was something off about it. The tune was wrong, twisted. "Hey, I cleared my throat, trying to break the tension. "Where did you say you were coming from?" She didn't answer, just kept humming that eerie tune, her eyes wide and unblinking, staring straight ahead. I pressed down on the gas, eager to get to the next town, to drop her off somewhere, anywhere. But the road stretched on, endless and dark, and there was no sign of civilization. The humming stopped. For a moment, the silence was worse than the sound. I glanced over at her again, and she was looking right at me now, her lips parted in a strange, almost unnatural smile. "They're coming," she whispered. My heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "The ones who sing." I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the highway. The silence outside was deafening, but I swore I could still hear that faint hum, just beyond the reach of my ears. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. "Get out of the car." She didn't move, just sat there with that unsettling smile plastered across her face. "I said get out." Still, she didn't move. I reached over and grabbed the handle of her door, throwing it open. But as I did, her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, her grip ice cold. Her eyes were no longer wide and hollow. They were black, like pits of darkness that swallowed the light. "They're already here," she whispered, her voice no longer soft. It was a chorus now, layered with voices that weren't hers. I yanked my arm away and scrambled out of the car, backing away from her as fast as I could. She stayed in the passenger seat, staring at me with those black eyes, her smile growing wider. And then, from the darkness around us, I heard it. A low, mournful song, like a choir of voices drifting on the wind. It surrounded me, growing louder with every second, until it was all I could hear. The hum, the singing, the voices. I ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I couldn't hear the song anymore. The desert stretched out in every direction, but I kept running, my lungs burning, my heart pounding in my chest. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I looked back at the highway. My car was still there, but the passenger door was open, and the girl was gone. The singing had stopped, but I knew it was only a matter of time before it started again. Somewhere out in the darkness, the voices were waiting, and I was trapped on this endless road with no way out. It was supposed to be a quick drive, no more than 2 hours through the winding back roads of West Virginia. I'd done it plenty of times before, driving from Charleston to visit my cousin in his remote cabin by the mountains. Nothing but trees, darkness, and the occasional deer crossing sign. Easy, right? But that night, everything went wrong. I left later than I planned, the sun already dipping below the horizon as I pulled onto Route 74. It was just after 8 p.m., and the moon was barely a sliver in the sky. A storm had rolled through earlier, and the asphalt still glistened from the rain, casting back the beams of my headlights like tiny glass shards. The air felt thick, almost heavy, and a dense fog began to creep in, swirling around my car as I drove deeper into the woods. I should have known better. These roads aren't the kind you mess around with after dark. The GPS on my phone said I had about an hour to go, but it flickered in and out of service. I wasn't too worried. I knew the way. Or so I thought. After about 30 minutes of driving, I noticed something strange. The road began to look unfamiliar. Route 74 was a narrow 2-lane highway that snaked through the forest, but I didn't remember the trees being this close to the road. They were pressing in from both sides now, their branches hanging low like skeletal fingers reaching for the car. The fog thickened, turning the world beyond my headlights into a swirling gray void. I glanced at my phone. The GPS was dead. No signal. Just a black screen. I tapped it a couple of times, but nothing happened. Annoyed, I tossed it onto the passenger seat and kept driving. I'd just stay on the highway and keep going straight. Eventually, I'd hit a landmark I recognized. But as the minutes ticked by, a creeping sense of unease started to settle in my chest. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, without any sign of an exit or even a bend in the road. No road signs, no mile markers, just the trees and that suffocating fog. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The radio crackled softly, stuck between stations, but I left it on just for the comfort of some sound. As I adjusted the volume, I caught something in the corner of my eye. A figure, standing by the side of the road. I slammed on the brakes instinctively, the car skidding slightly on the wet asphalt. My heart raced as I turned to get a better look, but there was no one there. I blinked, my breath coming out in quick, shallow bursts. Maybe it was just a trick of the fog. I couldn't have seen someone, not this far out in the middle of nowhere. I forced myself to keep driving, but that uneasy feeling clung to me like a shadow. Another 10 minutes passed, and the fog grew thicker, so dense I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. The road was starting to feel wrong, like it was leading me somewhere I didn't want to go. I leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Where the hell was I? Suddenly, the headlights flickered, and the car lurched, sputtering for a second before the engine regained its rhythm. I cursed under my breath. Not now. I couldn't break down out here. I was in the middle of nowhere, with no phone service, and no idea where I was. Then, out of the fog, I saw it. A gas station. A small, old one, the kind you might see in a black and white photo from the 1950s. The neon sign was flickering, barely legible, but it was the first sign of life I'd seen in miles. I felt a wave of relief. I'd pull in, ask for directions, and figure out where I'd gone wrong. As I approached, the station seemed off. There were no cars, no lights inside, but the pump stood there as if waiting for customers. I slowed down and turned into the lot. My tires crunched over gravel, and I parked in front of the entrance. I stepped out, the air heavy with dampness and a strange metallic smell. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I approached the door. I could see a faint light inside now, a dull, flickering bulb swinging above the counter. The door creaked as I pushed it open. "Hello?" I called, stepping inside. The smell hit me first, stale, like mold, and something long forgotten. The counter was empty, except for an old, dusty cash register and a few scattered newspapers. I glanced around, but there was no one there. I knocked on the counter, calling out again, but the only answer was the soft hum of the flickering light overhead. Something about the place felt wrong. Very wrong. I stepped back outside, my skin crawling, and looked around. There was a payphone by the side of the building. Desperate, I rushed over to it. I lifted the receiver, but there was nothing. No dial tone, just silence. I was about to give up when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A figure standing at the edge of the lot, barely visible through the fog. It was the same figure I'd seen earlier on the road. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back. I couldn't make out any details, just a silhouette, standing perfectly still, facing me, watching. Without thinking, I bolted back to the car, throwing myself inside and locking the doors. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, jamming them into the ignition. The engine sputtered for a moment before roaring to life. I didn't wait. I slammed my foot on the gas and tore out of the lot, tires skidding on the gravel. As I sped down the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure was gone, but something else caught my attention. Something far worse. The gas station wasn't there. I blinked, my pulse racing. The lot was empty. There was nothing behind me but fog and trees. No sign of the building, no pumps, no flickering neon sign. Just an empty stretch of road. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I losing it? I forced myself to keep driving, refusing to stop until I found something, anything, that would ground me in reality. But the road continued on, endlessly, with no end in sight. I don't know how long I drove before the car sputtered again, this time for real. The gas gauge dipped below empty, and the engine gave a final cough before dying completely. I rolled to a stop on the side of the road, my heart pounding in my ears. The fog was thicker than ever, pressing against the windows like a living thing. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. I had to think, had to figure out what to do next. Then I saw it. Through the fog, up ahead, another gas station. It was the same one. The same flickering neon sign. The same old pumps. The same building I had just left behind. But this time, the figure wasn't standing at the edge of the lot. It was standing right next to my car. I didn't dare turn my head to look. I could feel it there, its presence heavy, oppressive, as if it was watching me, waiting. I reached for the ignition, my hand shaking. The keys were still in there, but the engine was dead. And then, slowly, methodically, there was a tap on my window. There's something hypnotic about driving at night, the way the white lines blur into a single, endless stream, guiding you forward. Just you, the road, and your thoughts. It's peaceful, almost meditative. That's what I kept telling myself as I cruised down Highway 65, a remote stretch of road through the middle of the Midwest. It was the quickest way to my destination, a small cabin on the outskirts of Minnesota where my brother had moved a few months back. He'd been nagging me to visit, to get away from it all. So, after a long week at work, I packed up, gassed up the car, and hit the road. By the time I left Des Moines, it was just after 8 p.m., and the sky had already turned a deep, velvety black. My GPS showed about 4 more hours of driving, most of it through back roads. That was fine by me. I wasn't in a rush, and the solitude of the drive was welcome. For the first hour, everything was normal. The road was quiet, only the occasional distant glow of headlights coming from the opposite direction. I had the radio tuned to some classic rock station, the steady beat of Led Zeppelin keeping me company. I'd planned to stop at a gas station for a break around 10:30, but as I glanced at the dashboard clock, I noticed something odd. It was already 10:40, and I hadn't seen a gas station or any sign of civilization for over an hour. I shook it off. Rural highways weren't exactly teeming with 24-hour service stations. I was sure I'd find something soon enough. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Still no gas station, no exits, just the road stretching out in front of me like a black ribbon. And then, the detour sign. It seemed to appear out of nowhere, a bright orange rectangle on the side of the highway, illuminated by my headlights. Detour ahead, follow signs. I groaned. The last thing I wanted was a detour, but I figured I didn't have much choice. The road curved ahead, and as I rounded the bend, I saw it, a narrow dirt road branching off to the right, marked with another detour sign. I slowed down, reluctant but resigned, and turned onto the dirt road. The car jolted as my tires hit the rough terrain. The road was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 cars, and the trees on either side loomed close, their branches hanging low like dark sentinels. My high beams cut through the darkness, but the fog that had begun to settle made it hard to see more than a few yards ahead. I kept driving, expecting the detour to lead me back to the main highway after a mile or 2. But the road just kept going, winding deeper into the woods. I hadn't seen another car since I'd turned off. No houses, no lights, just the dense wall of trees pressing in on either side. The uneasy feeling started as a small knot in my stomach, but it grew with every passing minute. Something about this road felt wrong, too isolated, too quiet. After what felt like forever, I saw another detour sign up ahead. It directed me to take a left onto an even narrower road, one that was barely more than a dirt path. The fog was thicker now, swirling in the beams of my headlights like smoke. I hesitated. This couldn't be right. I pulled over for a second, checking my phone, but of course, there was no signal. Just a black screen, mocking me. The GPS had stopped tracking me the moment I turned onto the detour. I tried refreshing it, but nothing changed. I sighed, gripping the wheel tighter. I could either keep going and hope the detour led me back to the highway, or turn around and retrace my steps. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I realized with a sinking feeling that I hadn't seen any turnoffs or alternate routes since I'd started the detour. I'd been too focused on the road ahead to notice. I made the decision to keep going. The road became rougher, bumpier, and the fog grew so thick I had to slow down to a crawl just to see the next few feet in front of me. My headlights seemed to barely pierce the dense mist. Every now and then, I thought I saw movement at the edges of the road, just shadows, flickers of light that disappeared the moment I looked directly at them. An hour passed, then another. My heart pounded in my chest, each jolt of the car over the uneven ground making me more anxious. I should have hit the highway again by now, should have seen something, anything. But the road just kept twisting and turning, deeper into the woods. The trees seemed taller now, their branches hanging lower, as if the forest itself was closing in around me. I checked the clock again. 2 a.m. That's when I noticed the gas gauge. It was low, much lower than it should have been. I hadn't been driving that fast, and I was sure I'd filled up before leaving the city, but the needle was hovering dangerously close to empty. That was when the headlights flickered. My breath caught in my throat. The lights sputtered once, twice, and then stabilized. But it was enough to send a wave of panic through me. I couldn't afford to break down out here, not in the middle of nowhere. I had no cell service, no idea where I was, and no backup plan. Just as I started to calm myself down, something darted across the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering against my ribs. I barely caught a glimpse of it, just a flash of movement. Something dark, moving fast. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. I scanned the road ahead, but there was nothing. The fog swirled in the beams of my headlights, playing tricks on my eyes. I could have sworn I saw something, but maybe it was just an animal, a deer or a coyote. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep going. The road was straightening out now, the trees thinning slightly. I told myself that was a good sign, that I was getting closer to civilization. Then I saw it. Up ahead, through the fog, a faint glow appeared on the side of the road. As I got closer, I realized what it was. A gas station. A small, run-down one, with a single flickering light above the entrance. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. But I didn't care. I needed gas, and I needed to stop. I pulled up to one of the old pumps and stepped out of the car. The cold night air hit me like a slap, and I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter around me. The station was eerily quiet, no sounds of crickets or wind, just the oppressive silence of the fog. I lifted the gas pump, but it was dead. No gas, no power. Frustrated, I walked toward the small building, hoping to find someone inside. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar, and the faint glow of a flickering TV came from inside. "Hello?" I called, stepping cautiously through the doorway. The inside was even worse than the outside. Shelves stood half empty, covered in dust. The air was stale, and the only sound was the soft crackle of static from an old TV in the corner. There was no one behind the counter, no sign of life at all. But then I heard it. A soft tapping, coming from somewhere behind the building. My blood ran cold as I stepped back, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, like something, or someone, was trying to get my attention. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, it slammed shut in front of me. I froze, my heart in my throat. The tapping had stopped, replaced by something worse, a low, rasping breath coming from just behind the door. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted back to the car, throwing myself into the driver's seat and turning the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life, and I peeled out of the lot without looking back. As I sped down the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. But the gas station had disappeared, swallowed by the fog. I drove for hours, not stopping, not thinking, just driving. The fog began to lift, and the sky turned from black to gray. I eventually found myself back on the main highway, the familiar white lines stretching out before me. I never found out what that detour was, or where it led. But one thing is certain, I'll never take that road again. It started out like any other road trip. Just me, my beat-up Ford, and a long stretch of open highway. I was headed to a friend's wedding up in northern Montana, a solid 12-hour drive from Denver, but I didn't mind. I'd always loved road trips, the solitude, the music, the freedom of knowing you're not tied to anyone or anything. Plus, I had a decent playlist and plenty of snacks to keep me going. The first few hours flew by without issue. I'd taken Interstate 25 most of the way, but somewhere past Cheyenne, I decided to switch things up, opting for the scenic route. I always liked the idea of discovering some forgotten back road, away from the beaten path. The map app on my phone suggested a shortcut that would save me at least an hour. It was a rural highway, cutting straight through the plains, almost a direct shot to my destination. At first, the road was peaceful. Flat stretches of farmland sprawled out on either side, the occasional windmill or barn silhouetted against the horizon. The sun was setting, casting the fields in a golden glow, and for a while, I was lulled into a kind of easy calm. It was just me and the road, the hum of the engine, and the wide open sky. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a heavy fog began to settle over the fields. It crept in slowly at first, like wisps of smoke drifting in from nowhere. Within minutes, it thickened into a dense, rolling mist, swallowing the road ahead. My headlights barely cut through it, and I found myself slowing down, squinting through the windshield to see more than a few feet in front of me. I glanced at my phone. No signal. Typical. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, it wasn't surprising. I figured I'd be back in range soon enough. I drove on, the fog pressing closer. After a while, I started to notice something strange. The road seemed different, narrower. The yellow dividing lines faded almost to nothing. It felt older, more worn down than I remembered when I'd first turned onto it. The trees that lined the highway, which had been sparse and scattered, were now thick and gnarled, their branches arching overhead like skeletal hands, reaching for each other across the road. An uneasy feeling crept over me. I didn't remember seeing any dense forest on the map when I'd checked earlier, but maybe I'd just overlooked it. I kept telling myself it was fine, that it was probably just the fog playing tricks on my mind. But I couldn't shake the growing sense that something wasn't right. The minutes ticked by, but the fog didn't lift. If anything, it seemed to thicken, growing darker, almost suffocating in its intensity. My GPS had been frozen for the last half hour, stuck on the same stretch of road. That's when I saw it. A figure in the fog. It was just a flicker at first, barely visible through the dense mist. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively let off the gas, squinting through the windshield. There, on the side of the road, was a person. Or at least, it looked like a person. They were standing perfectly still, too still, facing the highway, not moving, not even turning as my car approached. As I passed by, I caught a glimpse of their face, pale, expressionless, eyes wide open, staring blankly into the fog. My stomach dropped. There was something wrong about the way they stood there, like they weren't even real. I kept driving, resisting the urge to glance in the rearview mirror. My hands gripped the wheel tighter as I tried to shake off the image of that face. I must have imagined it, just a shadow in the fog. But the pounding in my chest wouldn't slow down, and the further I drove, the worse the feeling in my gut got. Then, without warning, the road split. No signs, no warning, just a fork in the highway, with one road veering left and another to the right. Both paths disappeared into the thick fog, equally foreboding. I hadn't seen a single road sign in miles. No markers, no mileposts, nothing to tell me where I was. I pulled over, my heart racing. The GPS was still frozen, offering no help. I tried refreshing it, but the screen just blinked at me, useless. Frustrated, I turned off the engine and leaned back in my seat, trying to think. I hadn't seen another car for hours. No lights, no towns, nothing. I was starting to feel completely isolated. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, faint at first, like the distant hum of a radio. It was coming from somewhere outside the car. I rolled down my window, just a crack, listening. The sound grew louder, like static mixed with the faintest whisper of voices. I turned to look, but there was nothing out there, just the fog, thick and impenetrable. But the noise continued, growing louder and clearer, the whispers blending together, overlapping. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something unsettling about the way they rose and fell in the mist. Without thinking, I started the car again, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. I wasn't staying here any longer. I chose the left road and gunned it, speeding off into the fog, desperate to leave whatever that sound was behind. But the road didn't feel right. The pavement was rougher, cracked, with weeds growing up through the asphalt. It felt like I was driving on a road that hadn't been used in years. And still, the fog clung to everything, a thick, suffocating blanket. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just a detour, just a shortcut. I'd find my way back to the main highway soon enough. But the road kept winding, twisting deeper into the woods. The trees loomed closer, and the fog seemed to throb with a life of its own. Then, up ahead, I saw them again. The figures. This time, there were 3 of them, standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop just a few feet in front of them. They stood in a line, motionless, their faces hidden in the shadows. My headlights illuminated their forms, but their eyes, those wide, blank eyes, reflected nothing. They didn't flinch, didn't react, just stood there, staring straight ahead. My heart was hammering in my chest, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. I didn't know what to do. I honked the horn, but they didn't move. I yelled out the window, but they didn't respond. That's when I noticed something even more terrifying. Their feet weren't touching the ground. They hovered, just inches above the asphalt, perfectly still, like they were suspended in the air. My blood ran cold. I slammed the car into reverse, backing up as fast as I could, my hands trembling. As I reversed, they began to move. Slowly at first, then faster, gliding toward me, their forms flickering in and out of the fog. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight with fear. I swung the wheel hard, spinning the car around, and hit the gas, speeding back the way I'd come. The fog closed in behind me, and in the rearview mirror, I could see them. Still there, still following. Their blank eyes locked on me, never blinking, never faltering. I drove faster than I ever had before, the car bouncing over the rough road, but the figures stayed right behind me. No matter how fast I went, they kept pace, gliding silently through the mist. I don't know how long I drove, minutes, hours. Time seemed to stretch out, the fog warping everything around me. But eventually, the road began to smooth out, the trees thinning. And then, without warning, I was back on the main highway. The fog lifted almost instantly, the clear night sky stretching out above me. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. The figures were gone. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I picked it up, relief flooding through me as I saw the GPS had finally recalibrated. I was only about an hour from my destination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the road I'd just come from didn't really exist, or shouldn't have. I glanced at the GPS again, scrolling through the map to see where I'd been. But there was no sign of any detour, no side roads, nothing but a long, straight highway. I didn't tell anyone at the wedding about what happened that night, but every time I get in my car now, I feel like I'm being watched, like there's something just beyond the edge of the road, waiting in the fog. It started with an argument, like so many road trips do. "You're not following the map, James," Emma snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my eyes glued to the narrow, winding road that snaked through the dark forest. The GPS had led us off the main highway an hour ago, taking us down some back roads that looked more like old, forgotten trails. I tried to keep my tone calm, but my patience was wearing thin. "Emma, the GPS says this is a shortcut. We're fine. We'll get to the motel in no time," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. In reality, the road was unnerving. No streetlights, no signs, just a thin strip of cracked asphalt swallowed up by dense trees. It had been hours since we'd seen another car, and the farther we drove, the thicker the forest seemed to grow. The late autumn sky was pitch black now, with no moon to illuminate the way. Our headlights barely cut through the oppressive darkness. Emma sighed, crossing her arms. "It's just, I don't like this, okay? We should have stayed on the interstate. This doesn't feel right." She wasn't wrong. There was something off about the road, but I didn't want to admit it. Pride kept my foot on the gas pedal. The whole point of this trip was to clear our heads, to fix the cracks in our relationship, but all it was doing was making things worse. The road twisted sharply, and I slowed the car, carefully navigating the tight bend. As we rounded the corner, something caught my eye. An old, faded sign on the side of the road, barely visible in the beam of the headlights. "Dead end, 5 miles. Emma saw it too. "Dead end? This isn't a highway, James. Where the hell are we?" I frowned at the sign. It looked ancient, the paint chipped and weathered. "It's probably just outdated. Roads like this, they don't get much maintenance. We'll keep going for a bit, and if it really is a dead end, we'll turn around." But my gut told me something was wrong. I just didn't know what. We drove in silence for another 10 minutes. The trees were taller now, their branches hanging over the road like claws. The headlights illuminated nothing but black trunks and tangled roots. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. No towns, no other cars, just us. "James, we should turn back," Emma said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. Before I could answer, the car's headlights flickered. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the dashboard. Everything was still on. The engine hummed beneath us, and the radio was softly playing, but the lights had just dimmed for a second. I tapped the brakes, and the headlights flickered again, this time more violently. The road ahead plunged into darkness before the lights blinked back on, casting eerie shadows across the trees. "What was that?" Emma whispered, sitting up straight in her seat. "I don't know," I said, keeping my eyes on the road, my heart hammering. "Probably just a bad bulb or something." But I didn't believe that. The air felt thicker, like something was closing in around us. As we continued, the car began to sputter. I felt a faint shudder in the engine, just a quick stutter, like the car was catching its breath. The radio hissed with static, and the headlights flickered again. I slowed the car, pulling over to the side of the road. "Let me check the engine," I muttered, trying to sound calm, but my heart was pounding. "Don't," Emma said, her eyes wide. "James, please, don't get out." I hesitated. The fear in her voice made me pause, but I forced a reassuring smile. "It's fine. I'll just take a look and we'll get back on the road." I opened the door, the cold night air rushing in, heavy with the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the darkness. The forest was deathly silent. No wind, no rustling leaves, no animals. Just silence. I popped the hood, the flashlight shaking slightly in my hand as I tried to steady my nerves. The engine looked fine. Nothing seemed out of place. I was about to close the hood when I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was Emma, but as I listened closer, I realized the sound was coming from somewhere behind me, deep in the trees. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It wasn't just one whisper. It was many. Dozens of faint voices, all overlapping, their words unintelligible but insistent, like they were trying to get my attention. I spun around, shining the flashlight into the woods. The beam sliced through the darkness, revealing nothing but trees and shadows. "James!" Emma's voice cut through the quiet, sharp with panic. I slammed the hood shut and hurried back to the car. "What is it?" I asked, sliding into the driver's seat, my hands trembling. She pointed ahead, her face pale. "Look." I followed her gaze, and my blood turned to ice. In the distance, barely visible through the fog that had begun to settle on the road, was a figure. It stood perfectly still, its outline blurred by the mist, but I could see enough to know it was a person. They were standing in the middle of the road, facing us. Is that someone?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I don't know," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do we do?" I swallowed hard, forcing myself to think rationally. "It's probably just some local, maybe a hunter or someone lost. I'll drive around them." I started the car, the engine roaring to life. Slowly, I eased back onto the road, keeping my eyes on the figure. As we approached, I could make out more details. The person was tall, their clothes old and tattered, hanging off them like rags. Their head was down, chin resting against their chest. They didn't move. I swerved to the left, giving them a wide berth. As we passed, I glanced out the window, my breath catching in my throat. The figure's face was hidden in shadow, but I could see their eyes, wide open, staring straight ahead, unblinking. We drove in silence for a few moments, neither of us daring to speak. Then Emma whispered, "Did you see their eyes?" I nodded, my throat dry. "Yeah." We kept driving, but the road didn't seem to change. The same winding path, the same thick trees pressing in on both sides. It felt like we were trapped in some endless loop. My knuckles were white as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to shake off the fear creeping up my spine. Suddenly, Emma gasped, "James, look!" Up ahead, standing in the middle of the road again, was the same figure. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "That's not possible. We just passed them." But there they were. Same tattered clothes, same bowed head, same eerie stillness. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a stop just a few feet from the figure. My heart raced as I stared at them, my mind spinning. What is happening?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I whispered, barely able to speak. The figure slowly lifted its head, its eyes locking onto mine. For a brief, horrifying moment, I felt like I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Their eyes were hollow, empty, like they were staring straight through me. Without thinking, I threw the car into reverse and slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched backward, and I twisted the wheel, turning us around. I wasn't going to stay on that road any longer. But as we sped away, the headlights flickered again, casting the trees in a strobe-like effect. In every flash of light, I saw more figures, standing just off the road, hidden between the trees, watching us. They weren't moving, just watching. I floored it, my only goal to get off that road, to get away from whatever was out there. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, out of nowhere, we hit something hard. The car skidded to a stop, and I slammed my head against the steering wheel. When I looked up, I realized we had come to a dead end. There was no road ahead, just a wall of trees. And standing in front of us, blocking the way, was the figure again. Emma screamed. I've always loved road trips. There's something about the open highway, the freedom, the endless sky that makes the world feel both enormous and reachable at the same time. This trip wasn't exactly planned, though. My best friend Todd called me in a panic earlier that afternoon, telling me he needed help moving some things out of his family's old lake house. Apparently, they were selling the place, and he had waited until the last minute to pack everything. Classic Todd. So, I loaded up my car with some snacks and a duffel bag, figuring I'd be back home in a day or two. The drive from Dallas to this tiny town near the Texas-Oklahoma border Wasn't supposed to take more than 4 hours, but as soon as I hit the state line, things started getting weird. First, my GPS lost signal. Not exactly strange for a rural area, but still annoying. I pulled over to the side of the road, flipping between apps, but nothing worked. Fine, I thought. I'll just wing it. I'd been to the lake house before, years ago, and the roads around here weren't complicated. But as I drove, I began to notice something unsettling. The road I was on didn't seem familiar. It wasn't the wide, paved county highway I remembered. Instead, it was a narrow 2-lane stretch, the kind you see in the deep country where asphalt turns to gravel without warning. Dense trees pressed in from both sides, their branches heavy with Spanish moss that swayed in the breeze, casting long shadows over the road. The deeper I drove, the more it felt like the road was swallowing me whole. After about an hour of driving, I should have reached Todd's turnoff, but I hadn't seen any of the landmarks I remembered. No gas station, no old diner, just road, trees, and the occasional abandoned house that looked like it hadn't seen a human being in decades. That's when I saw the first car. It was an old, beat-up sedan sitting on the side of the road. The hood was popped open, and steam poured from the engine. At first, I thought about stopping to help, but as I slowed down, I noticed something off. There was no one around. The car had clearly been abandoned for a while. The windows were caked in dirt, and there was no sign of any recent activity. A shiver ran down my spine as I pressed the gas and sped past it. Another mile passed, then 2, and I spotted another car. This one was different. An old station wagon with flat tires and broken windows. Just like the sedan, it sat lifeless on the side of the road, looking like it had been left to rot for years. I kept driving, faster now, the pit in my stomach growing. I must have driven another 5 miles, my mind racing, trying to figure out what was going on, when I saw it. A third car. This one was a truck, its front smashed against a tree like it had swerved off the road. The headlights were still on, casting a dim glow through the fog that had suddenly appeared, clinging to the ground like some kind of ethereal blanket. I slowed the car again, hesitating. Something inside me screamed not to stop, but my rational mind told me someone could be hurt, trapped inside that wrecked truck. Against my better judgment, I pulled over and grabbed my phone. No signal still. I stepped out of the car, the air cold and heavy, carrying a strange metallic scent. The forest around me was silent, too silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, not even the faint hum of wind, just dead air. "Hello?" I called out, moving toward the truck. "Anyone there?" No answer. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and peered through the shattered driver's side window. The seat was empty. The truck, just like the others, was abandoned. But there was something else. Blood. Not much, but a smear on the steering wheel, and a few drops on the cracked leather seat. My breath caught in my throat. I backed away quickly, heart racing, and turned to head back to my car. That's when I noticed it. The road ahead. It was different. No longer the same narrow, cracked asphalt I had been driving on. Now it was just gravel, stretching out into the fog that seemed to have thickened while I was distracted. My car, only a few yards away, looked smaller, farther, like I'd been walking for miles instead of a few feet. I quickened my pace, practically running now, and jumped back into the driver's seat. I locked the doors, started the engine, and slammed my foot on the gas. For the next few miles, I drove like a maniac, pushing my car faster than I should have on the unfamiliar road. The fog closed in tighter, reducing my visibility to almost nothing. I kept expecting to see another abandoned vehicle, but instead, the road stretched out endlessly, as if I were trapped in some nightmarish loop. Finally, After what felt like an eternity, I saw a glimmer of hope. Lights. Headlights coming toward me. I slowed down, relief flooding through me. Another car. Maybe they could tell me where I was. Maybe I wasn't lost after all. As the vehicle got closer, my relief turned to confusion, then horror. It was the same truck. The same rusted, broken truck I'd seen smashed into the tree just a few miles back. Only now, it was coming toward me. Its headlights flickered erratically, and the truck swerved slightly, as if it were being driven by something, or someone who didn't belong behind the wheel. I slammed on my brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. The truck slowed as it neared me, its engine growling like a wounded animal. It came to a stop right next to my car, its window level with mine. I hesitated, but then, slowly, I turned my head to look. The driver's seat was empty. No one was behind the wheel. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I floored the gas pedal, my tires kicking up gravel as I sped away. My breath came in ragged gasps, my hands slick with sweat as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't know where I was going anymore, only that I had to get away from that truck. But no matter how far or fast I drove, the road never seemed to change. The trees, the fog, the endless gravel, it was all the same. My dashboard clock wasn't moving either. Time, it seemed, had stopped. And then I saw them. Standing in the middle of the road, barely visible through the fog, were people. Or at least, what looked like people. They were thin, impossibly tall, their limbs too long, their faces obscured by the mist. I slowed down, heart hammering in my chest, unsure of what to do. As I neared them, one of the figures stepped forward, directly into my path. I slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt, just inches from them. For a moment, everything was still. Then the figure bent down, its face slowly coming into view. It was a man. No, not a man. His eyes were sunken, hollow, his skin stretched too tight across his skull. He stared at me through the windshield, unblinking, his mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He raised one bony hand and tapped on the glass. Once, twice. I snapped. Throwing the car into reverse, I backed up as fast as I could. But as I did, the other figures moved closer, surrounding me. Their eyes, those same hollow, dead eyes, all fixed on me. I threw the car into drive and floored it, aiming directly at the figure in front of me. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought I could outrun them. Maybe I thought they weren't real. But as the car sped toward him, the figure didn't move, didn't flinch, and just before I hit him, he vanished. Gone. Like smoke. My car swerved wildly, tires skidding on the gravel, and before I could regain control, I crashed into the ditch. The impact knocked the breath out of me, but I was still alive. The car, though, wasn't. The engine sputtered and died, leaving me in total silence. I looked up, dazed, and saw them again, standing at the edge of the road, watching, waiting. I locked the doors, though I knew it wouldn't matter. They were coming. 2 days later, a hiker found my car abandoned on the side of a gravel road, deep in the forest. No one knows how it got there, or why the road it was found on doesn't exist on any map. The air had that thick, damp feeling, like it was about to storm. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky bruised with deep purple and black streaks. I was somewhere in northern Pennsylvania, driving down a forgotten stretch of highway, with dense woods pressing in on either side. My destination was still a good 3 hours away, but I hadn't seen another car in what felt like forever. I turned the radio off. The static that had filled the car for the past half hour was only making me more anxious. Silence, save for the hum of the engine, felt better, more peaceful, or at least less eerie. I had taken this route to avoid traffic, but I regretted it now. This road felt abandoned, lost to time, like the kind of place where you'd expect to find a ghost town at the end of it. The GPS kept telling me to keep going straight for another 50 miles, but the voice sounded tinny and far away, as if even it didn't trust this road. The trees seemed to close in tighter as I drove, their dark silhouettes against the last light of day, making them look like twisted figures reaching out toward me. I tried to shake off the feeling creeping up my spine, but something about this road didn't feel right. It was too empty, too quiet. There weren't even any road signs, just an endless stretch of cracked pavement with no markers of civilization. I hadn't even passed a gas station in miles. My phone was sitting in the passenger seat, no bars, no signal. I had half a mind to pull over, check the map, but something told me to just keep going. Stopping on this road felt like an invitation for something I didn't want to meet. That's when I saw the lights. At first they were faint, just a distant glow in my rearview mirror. But as they grew closer, I felt a small sense of relief. Finally, someone else was out here. It was an old truck, the kind you'd expect to see in a farming town, with big round headlights that cut through the growing darkness. I relaxed a little, knowing I wasn't alone anymore. But then the truck got closer, too close. Its headlights filled my mirrors, blinding me for a moment. I slowed down, hoping it would pass, but it didn't. Instead, it seemed to match my speed, sticking right on my bumper. I glanced in my rearview mirror, squinting through the glare, but I couldn't make out the driver. The cab of the truck was shadowed, as if there were no one behind the wheel at all. I gave a quick tap on the brakes, hoping the truck would back off, but it didn't. It just stayed there, so close that I could hear the low rumble of its engine over my own. "Okay, fine," I muttered, speeding up to put some distance between us. I pressed down on the gas, the engine whining as I hit 70, then 80. For a brief moment, the truck fell back, its headlights shrinking in my mirrors. But just as quickly, it surged forward again, gaining on me with an eerie ease, like it didn't care about the speed limit or safety or anything, really. My heart pounded as I pushed my car to 90, then 95. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, sweat slicking my palms. This wasn't a game anymore. Whoever was driving that truck was playing with me, and I didn't want to find out why. I glanced at the GPS again, still 40 miles to the nearest town, and the truck was back. The roar of its engine filled my ears as it flew up behind me, its headlights washing over the interior of my car like a spotlight. The fear tightened in my chest as I gripped the wheel, unsure of what to do. I couldn't keep going like this. There was no telling how fast this old road could handle before it turned into a death trap. The truck blared its horn, a long, deep blast that rattled in my bones. The headlights flickered for a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something in the truck's cab, but it wasn't a person. Not exactly. It was a shape, distorted, unnatural, like a shadow trying to take form. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just some lunatic playing chicken on a dark road. There was something wrong here, something more than just a road rage incident. The thing in the truck wasn't human, or if it was, it wasn't anymore. Come on, I hissed, glancing down at the GPS. Still 38 miles to go. The numbers didn't seem to be changing fast enough. The truck surged forward again, and this time, it tapped my rear bumper. The jolt sent my car swerving, and I fought to keep control, my tires squealing on the pavement. Another tap, harder this time, and my car veered dangerously close to the edge of the road, where trees loomed like silent sentinels. I had no choice. I slammed on the brakes. The truck roared past me, its engine growling like a beast as it sped ahead. For a split second, I saw the back of the truck, covered in rust and grime, with no license plate. Then it was gone, disappearing into the darkness ahead like it had never existed. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling on the wheel. The silence that followed was deafening. No engine, no lights, just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. I let out a shaky breath and eased my foot off the brake, creeping forward at a crawl. I wanted to get off this road as fast as possible, but I didn't dare speed up again. My nerves were shot, and the last thing I needed was to wrap my car around a tree because I was too freaked out to think straight. The road stretched out in front of me, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt swallowed by darkness. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see those headlights again, but the truck was gone. Maybe I'd lost it for good. But then I saw something up ahead. At first, I thought it was just another set of headlights. Relief washed over me. Maybe another car, maybe someone normal this time. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't headlights. It was fire. A car was sitting in the middle of the road, completely engulfed in flames. The heat shimmered off the hood, and black smoke poured into the sky, thick and oily. The flames flickered and snapped, casting eerie shadows on the trees around it. The smell of burning rubber and metal filled the air, sharp and pungent. I slowed to a stop, my mind racing. There was no one around. No driver, no passengers, nothing. Just the car, burning like some kind of twisted beacon in the night. I reached for my phone, even though I knew I still didn't have any service. I had to do something, call for help, but as I looked down at the screen, something caught my eye. Movement. I snapped my head up and froze. There, standing just beyond the flames, was a figure. Tall, thin, and shrouded in shadow. They stood perfectly still, watching me through the fire. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their eyes on me, cold and empty. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Without thinking, I threw the car into reverse and slammed my foot on the gas. The tires screeched as I backed away, the burning car growing smaller in the distance, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching, waiting. I turned the wheel hard and whipped the car around, speeding down the road in the opposite direction. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep the car straight, but I didn't care. I needed to get out of here, needed to get away from whatever that was. The road twisted and turned, the trees blurring by as I sped down the narrow path. My heart pounded in my ears, and every shadow seemed to move. Every flicker of light felt like it was watching me. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see if it was following me. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw it. A sign for the interstate. The familiar green and white stood out against the darkness, like a lifeline. I hit the gas, tearing down the road until the trees thinned and the highway came into view. When I merged onto the interstate, my entire body sagged with relief. The headlights of passing cars felt like salvation, the hum of the traffic soothing in a way I'd never experienced before. But even as I drove, something gnawed at the back of my mind. What was that thing? That truck? The figure in the fire? I didn't have answers. I wasn't sure I wanted them. All I knew was I wasn't taking the back roads ever again. I've always prided myself on being calm under pressure. Maybe that's why I took the long drive from Chicago to Denver alone. A job interview, big opportunity, the kind that could change your life. I wasn't going to let nerves stop me, and besides, I thought the open road would help clear my head before the big day. But looking back, maybe it was a bad idea. Not because of the drive itself. It was what happened out there on that godforsaken stretch of road. I left Chicago late, thinking I'd get a jump on traffic. But by the time I hit the Nebraska state line, it was well after midnight, and the empty highway seemed to stretch forever. No cars, no lights, just miles of dark, flat nothingness, broken only by the occasional rusted-out gas station or billboard promoting places no one visited anymore. I was cruising along, radio off, just enjoying the hum of the engine, when I noticed something strange. A highway sign lit up in my headlights, but it wasn't like the standard green and white signs I'd been seeing all night. This one was old, with faded black letters that barely glowed in the dark. Exit 233, Merrow Road. I frowned. That wasn't on my GPS, and I'd been tracking this trip carefully. The GPS showed a clear route with no upcoming exits for at least 20 miles. But there it was, plain as day, or rather, night, an exit ramp I didn't expect. I debated for a moment, my fingers tapping the steering wheel. I still had half a tank of gas, so I didn't need to stop, but the pit in my stomach kept growing. What if I missed this exit and regretted it later? Maybe it would be a shortcut. After all, the highway had been dead for hours, and I wasn't making great time. On impulse, I flicked my blinker and turned onto the exit. The ramp was steep and curved sharply, plunging into a thick forest that seemed to appear out of nowhere. I hadn't even realized there were trees this thick in Nebraska. The moment my tires hit the rough pavement, I knew something was off. The road was old, crumbling at the edges, barely wide enough for 2 cars. I should have turned back, should have trusted my gut, but I kept going. I flicked my high beams on, and the light barely seemed to penetrate the thick fog rolling in through the trees. Every curve of the road seemed tighter than the last, the trees pressing closer as if they were trying to keep something in, or me out. I must have been driving for only 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity before I finally spotted a dim light ahead. It looked like a gas station, or at least what used to be one. The building was small and squat, the paint peeling off the wooden walls. A single flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over the cracked pavement. I pulled in and parked next to the only pump. The place looked abandoned, but I needed a break. I stepped out of the car, stretching my legs. The air was damp and heavy, almost suffocating. I glanced around, hoping to see some sign of life, an attendant, maybe even a stray dog, but there was nothing. Just silence. Even the crickets were quiet. I walked toward the small store attached to the station. The windows were fogged over, and as I approached, I noticed something unsettling. There were handprints smeared across the glass, like someone had been frantically trying to get out. My heart started to race. I grabbed the door handle and pushed it open with a creak. The inside smelled of mildew and old oil. The shelves were half empty, stocked with dusty cans of soup and expired chips. A lone ceiling fan spun lazily overhead, doing little to stir the heavy air. But what really caught my attention was the counter. There was no cashier. Instead, an old-fashioned bell sat there, the kind you'd see in movies, inviting you to ring it. I hesitated, glancing around. There were no security cameras, no signs of any employees. It was like the place had been forgotten by time. I reached out, my hand hovering over the bell for a moment before I tapped it lightly. Nothing. I rang it again, harder this time. Still nothing. That's when I heard it, a soft shuffling sound, like feet dragging across the floor, coming from the back of the store. My heart leaped into my throat, and I backed away from the counter, scanning the aisles for the source of the noise. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. No answer. The sound grew closer, slow and deliberate, like whoever or whatever was back there wasn't in any hurry. Every instinct screamed at me to get out of there, but my feet wouldn't move. I stood frozen, my eyes locked on the shadow at the end of the aisle. It was human-shaped, but wrong. The limbs were too long, the head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it were straining to hear me. I blinked, and the shadow was gone. The store was deathly quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Slowly, I backed up toward the door, not daring to turn my back on the aisles. As I reached for the door handle, the bell on the counter rang. By itself. I bolted. I slammed the door behind me and ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. The moment the engine roared to life, I peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching on the pavement. My heart was pounding in my chest as I sped down the road, the trees on either side closing in tighter and tighter. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the gas station fading into the distance. But it wasn't. It was still there, right behind me, as if I hadn't moved at all. The same flickering light, the same cracked pavement. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I pressed down on the gas pedal, pushing the car to its limit. But no matter how fast I went, the gas station stayed right there in my mirrors, always just behind me, like I was caught in some kind of loop. I tried to take a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. Maybe it was a trick of the fog, or maybe I was just too tired and my mind was playing tricks on me. I just needed to find the highway again, find some sign of normality. After what felt like hours of driving, I finally spotted another sign. But it wasn't for the highway. Exit 233, Marrow Road. I slammed on the brakes, my car skidding to a stop. My headlights illuminated the same faded black sign I had seen before, the same one that had led me to that cursed gas station. My blood ran cold. I was back where I had started, trapped on this never-ending road. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the sign, trying to make sense of it. How could I be back here? I hadn't turned around. I hadn't taken any exits. I'd been driving straight the whole time. Panic clawed at my throat. Suddenly, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. The same old truck from before. My heart skipped a beat. No, this couldn't be happening. The truck's headlights grew brighter, closer, until they were almost blinding. I slammed the car into gear and sped off, tires screeching as I tore down the road. But the truck followed, its engine roaring behind me, gaining speed. I pushed my car harder, the engine whining in protest as I flew down the narrow road. The truck was relentless, its headlights reflecting in my mirrors like twin eyes watching my every move. The trees blurred by as I sped faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But no matter how fast I went, the truck stayed right behind me, closing in, its headlights growing brighter and brighter until it was gone. Just like that, the truck disappeared, swallowed by the night. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, half expecting to see it reappear. But there was nothing, just darkness. For a long moment, I sat there, trying to catch my breath. The road was silent again. The only sound was the soft hum of my car's engine and the wind rustling through the trees. Then I saw it. Up ahead, through the trees, a flicker of light. The gas station. I screamed in frustration and slammed my fist against the steering wheel. I was trapped. No matter how far I drove, no matter which way I turned, I was stuck in this endless loop. And there was no way out.